Good evening and welcome to the Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 21st of August 2024. Apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Brake, Councillor Clark, Councillor Kemp. We have Councillor Goldwyn, Councillor Lawrence, and Councillor Waldy substituting.
And apologies too from Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Record of the meeting. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 20th of June as correct? I have no urgent matters. Are there any declaration of a DPI or other interests or any declaration of whipping? That brings us on to agenda item 5, Medway Local Plan Regulation 18 Consultation. I'll ask the Chief Planning Officer, Dave Harris, to introduce the report. Dave.
Good evening, members. I think looking around the room, you'll also notice I'm not Dave Harris, I'm Mark Brethwaite, the Assistant Director for Culture and Community. So looking around the room, I think most of you have seen a version of this presentation already, which I think is probably testament to the good work that Dave and his team have done in terms of getting coverage of this consultation quite far and wide. So we will move through the presentation relatively quickly and get on to questions. But local plan, as you know, large focus on homes, a big and challenging mandatory housing target for Medway. But it's also about the communities that we develop and the services that we provide to them and the facilities that they can access. It's about our environment. It's about our infrastructure and how we can deliver this amount of growth without grinding Medway to a halt, and how we can get people out of their cars and using alternative forms of transport and good quality public transport to move around the area. It's also about jobs, and that includes skills and education as well. So, as most of you already know, so this is a further Regulation 18 consultation, building on the previous Regulation 18 consultation that was undertaken in October, or in the autumn of last year. Essentially, that provided very broad options, and we felt that there was a need, and we certainly received feedback through this process that we needed to be clearer about the growth for Medway, and that has led to us putting out a consultation that consults on 3 broad growth options for Medway, which we'll talk through very quickly in a second. And the proposed strategic and thematic policies that sit around the local plan, essentially. And what this will do is provide greater certainty to residents, to members, to stakeholders, to employers about where our thinking is, essentially. Thanks, Dave. And the plan is driven by our vision for Medway to deliver on our ambitions for sustainable development. So being prepared for a sustainable and green future, supporting people to lead healthy lives, strengthening our communities, securing jobs and developing skills, but boosting pride in Medway through quality and resilient development. And we think, we believe that's important because when people are proud of the area they live, they feel happier, healthier, they want to get outside of their homes and spend time in public spaces, improving kind of people's health and well-being as well. But I'll hand over to Dave, who'll take you through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chairman. Members, you've seen this slide before about Medway's health and well-being, and you know that in terms of education and skills and work, it's really important to everybody in terms of their health and well-being. And we want those our young people to have the skills and the education that they need to get the jobs that they want and they enjoy. And we want those high-value jobs as well for them. And that will help with a lot of those other things, the cost of living, providing food on the table. So it's critical that we do both those things, that we don't become Commuterville. We don't want to be that. We want to have high-quality jobs here in Medway. And in relation to the universities, we're inviting people to come down here to study. They learn, they get those skills. We want them to stay in Medway and use those in high-value jobs here. So, key issues for us, which are important for this scrutiny. We want to support growth and innovation in the local economy. That's really key. We've got to be fit for the future. We've got to be flexible because we live in an ever-changing world. So we need to be adaptable and we need to be able to respond to those changes. We want to provide a strategy within the local plan that boosts that investment. We want these companies, they don't need to be in London anymore. They can be down here in Medway. And I constantly am greeting people off the train at Rochester or Chatham, and they're saying to me, we didn't realise, one, how brilliant Medway was, and also how close it is when you get on those high-speed trains. So it actually helps them to come down here. So we want more of them coming down here. We want to provide those opportunities in sustainable locations so that it's close to where people live, it's close to other facilities. But it also includes our town centres. You all know that our town centres, like all town centres around, or most town centres around the country, have really struggled over the last 10, 20 years. We've struggled because of blue water, we struggled because of the internet. So we need to revitalise those town centres, give them a new lease of life. It means bringing residential back in there, but also those community facilities, the employment as well within there. We've got some strategic sites, you'll know, out at Grain and Kings North. They've got very different offers there. Following this consultation, we will be doing an updated employment needs assessment, ready for the draft plan, so that when we get to examination next summer, we've got the most up-to-date evidence to help us when we're in front of the inspector. There are specialist areas that we need to give a lot of consideration to, like the creative and cultural industries. Coming out of COVID, the industry which has expanded the most in the country is the creative industries. Now we're here in Medway, we're ready for that. We're supporting its growth. You look at Chatham Intra, the creative industries that are there. You can see out at a historic dockyard, we've got the old police house coming forward there. We're part of the Thames Estuary growth area where there's a real focus on those creative industries. So we want to be at the forefront, and we are at the forefront of that. We've also got some amazing tourism areas and the rural areas as well. So that rural tourism. We want Medway to be more than just a day visit. So we want to build on that tourism. There's a lot of employment related to that. I've talked about our retail centres. And as Mark says, that the schools and developing our children, giving them those skills that they need so they can have a job that they really enjoy doing, like I do, like you do, and linked to that, providing the best opportunities for our residents. Digital is really important, and the plan supports, and it's got policies, it's got a section on digital transformation. It supports the delivery of good quality broadband and digital infrastructure, not only for residential, but for our businesses as well. If they're going to compete, they need that, and there'll be a requirement, new development coming forward, that they do provide for that. And we're leading on that. The planning team, we're developing an open digital planning project with MHLCLG. We're already one of only 8 authorities in the country who are live with a project called Plan X, and we're one of only 4 in the country who have gone live with Report a Planning Breach. So that's all digital transformation in the planning process. And a guy called Ewan Mills, who's a planner and digital specialist, he's described Plan X as the most exciting thing to be coming out of the digital planning world. And we're at the forefront of that. So we want to boost Medway's economic performance, continue boosting that, supporting businesses to innovate and to grow, to be at the forefront. As I said, that flexibility there to be responsive to changes. Digital is key to that. We want to support those learning and development skills, as I've said, so that everybody has those opportunities. And we've got some policies there in the plan for that. We'd welcome your thoughts on those policies and those sections in digital. So developing a spatial strategy, I'll go through this quite quickly because you've seen this for a while, many times. First thing is looking at what sites are available to us for employment, as well as for residential and gypsy and travellers. We know that Medway's constrained, so we have to look at those constraints and see what impact that has. And then we got that brownfield first, but we know that brownfield just by itself won't give us the enough sites for the number and choice of homes and employment that we need. So we need to assess all of the sites. We need to look at those larger sites which can deliver the services and infrastructure that serve the needs for residential, but also can provide those links to employment, those services which are within walking distance or a sustainable distance away. As Mark says, we're consulting on 3 broad options, and they're very different options to us. But we have a preferred strategy. So the first option, as you know, is that urban regeneration focus, where we look at our town centres, we look at our brownfield sites, our waterfront sites, and see what we can achieve on them, maximise that, go up as high as we can. And that's the more sustainable sites where there's the best transport options. The weaknesses of that is it doesn't necessarily reflect the character of Medway. It can be contrary to our heritage and design guidance, and it doesn't provide for all our needs. So we feel that there's benefit, but there's some weaknesses in that as well. The antithesis of that is to that dispersed growth, so we minimise the regeneration in our town centres and the riverside sites, and we look at those rural areas. The weaknesses of that is it takes up a lot more greenfield sites, it's less sustainable, it's more car orientated, and we haven't got those good links between the homes and businesses. So the blended version is looking for 50% of our growth on our brownfield sites, still getting that regeneration of our town centres, still that focus on the brownfield sites, that revitalising the waterfront areas, but then allowing for some development out on the on greenfield sites to enable to meet our growth needs and our growth targets in terms of employment as well as homes. So as you know, we've been out to consultation. We're starting to get some feedback there. We've done quite a number of events. We've still got quite a few to go. There does seem to be a recognition that Medway is growing. There is a recognition that we need to provide homes, but absolutely a recognition that it needs to come with the jobs necessary for that. That people don't want to be sitting in their queues and traffic going up to London or down to Maidstone or wherever. They want their jobs here in Medway in a sustainable location. Also, delivery of the infrastructure and services that are needed to support that growth. And for that infrastructure to be delivered early in the process, not like we're getting at the moment without a plan. With a plan, we can have policies which require certain things to be delivered early in that development process. Comments coming quite understandably that in terms of affordable homes, first point of call should be from Medway communities. A better mix, meeting our needs, not just what developers feel we need. There are concerns about, understandable concerns about congestion and additional traffic. We know that, you all know that if we just deliver for our growth and we don't do something about transport, Medway will grind to a halt and all the implications of that. So we need to address that. There are some differing views on preferred spatial options. We will consider those. We want people's views. Nothing is fixed in stone. We've got a preferred option, but we're happy to hear people's comments and stakeholders' comments on that. There are concerns about the loss of good quality farmland. There are some queries about green belt and grey belt and what's coming out of the new planning policy on that. We're trying to explain that. And then there's understandable concern about the implications on Medway for development in neighbouring councils as well. And we need to be alive to that. And we need to make sure that if those proposals do come forward, there is the mitigation to make sure that the impact on Medway is good, not harmful. Next steps is the consultation closes on the 8th of September. We've got a lot more work to do in terms of the evidence base. We've got to consider all the comments that we've got. We will be looking at the new MPPF as it goes through its consultation and comes out the other side. At the moment, there's nothing which gives us concern that what we're doing is likely to cause us problems. Our housing need figure in the consultation is very similar to our existing housing need figure. We are going to be working very closely with those neighbouring councils, as I said, and our statutory consultees to look at what is needed, what mitigation is needed for us, particularly in relation to roads. And then early next year, we will be doing a draft plan ready to submit to the inspectorate quite quickly after that for examination later in 2025, and then getting that much needed adoption in 2026. So getting control for Medway by Medway Council rather than us being subject to planning by appeal. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Any member? Councillor Colvin.
Thank you, Chair. And before I talk to this item, I'd just like to say I earlier today spoke with Councillor Brake, who I'm subbing for this evening. David's recovered from his operation. He's recovering well, but he tells me that it'll be quite some time before he'll be able to join us committee work and like. So it appears you might have to put up with me for a little bit longer. I'd like to talk a bit about the digital communications and particularly policy DM22, which colleagues can find on page 223 of the agenda. In the second paragraph, it says all new major development proposals, and in brackets, residential, employment and commercial should, and then it's got some bullet points of all the good things that should be happening. I think that policy would be a lot better if we deleted the word major, because who decides what is a major development and what not? And I think every development in Medway should have the benefits of good communications. And I think fast broadband and mobile device connectivity is very important for economic development, and particularly in the rural areas, and where you talk about, you know, small businesses and those growing fast, but they should be able to go anywhere. And so I think that would be better without that word in. The other thing that I'm a little bit surprised at, we seem to, as far as the plan's concerned, have lost our ambition to be a smart city. There's no mention of smart cities that I can find anywhere in the document. And, you know, perhaps somebody could have a chat with Paul Boyd and he could find something to go in there. But to give a good example of how that would benefit, we've been putting temperature sensors in our highway network. So when the gritting vehicles go along, they don't grit in areas where it's not necessary. These have all been done retrospectively, of course, but you know, when we have a new development, surely it would be best for the spine roads in particular, you know, to have those temperature sensors built in and the connectivity, you know, between the device and the street columns that put it on, you know, to connect back to the lorries. That's all I've got to say. But you know, this is the future, and I think we're going to, you know, you did put a good emphasis on that, Dave, and that's absolutely right. But I think just needs that little tweak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garvin. Dave, would you like to respond?
Chairman, I think they're really good points. I've noted them down, so thank you, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. This is definitely deja vu for me because we went through this last week at Regen. I'm going to try and make some more strategic points rather than other points. And, you know, can I just put for the record, thank you to Dave and the team and the comms team for all the work they put in and for the clear want to, you know, engage in conversation about the local plan. I think has been absolutely excellent. So just on infrastructure, obviously we're moving away from any form of gas in new development. Are we confident that we can supply enough electricity as long with water to the new developments? 28,000 houses, 100,000 people. That's a lot of mobile phones being recharged in the future. In terms of public services, can't see anywhere in the local plan where we're going to build a new hospital for the 100,000 people that are going to be living here by 2041. The existing hospital is failing on so many levels, let alone getting on the site, parking, as well as the services it's providing. It'd be good to hear your thoughts on that. And then there is a general issue with providing local healthcare services like GPs and dentistry, on what you think is going on, or how we're going to solve some of that through the local plan. In terms of regeneration, I think one of the options is to build on Medway City Estate for housing. I think that sends the wrong message. And I'd also be very concerned about the people who'd have to live on Medway City Estate, even though they might be on the river, actually getting on and off the Medway City Estate with all the pollution and the heavy traffic that's around them. That doesn't seem to me to meet the health and well-being drive in your strategy. Brownfield first, I think we all agree brownfield first, but I think we also have to accept that brownfield development is horrendously expensive, and without lots of subsidy or incentives is going to be very difficult to achieve. So Dave, how do we make sure that it genuinely is brownfield first, and actually we don't build all over Capstan Valley and then all we're left with is brownfield sites in 2030? Just looking at the retail envelope maps that are in the report, clearly retail is going through a really difficult time and has done really since COVID. And I'm wondering whether we need to rethink our town centres, shrink the retail envelopes and actually come up with a new paradigm that might look at our town centres to be more about other leisure activities. And I think I reflected in the last meeting about when I'm lucky enough to travel quite a bit for business, and when you see how small towns like in Spain, how they deal with their spaces, they're much more attractive. It's nothing worse than lots of empty, boarded up property, or especially where they turn over a lot. In terms of our economic development, isn't it about time that we upgraded the M2? 2 lanes, maybe upgrade it to 3 lanes or maybe even 4 lanes to stop all the traffic coming through Medway and the pollution it brings and the gridlock traffic. I know there's a strong focus on net zero in the local plan, but net zero, I think, may have an impact of turning businesses off. And, how do we attract businesses that are clean but energy intensive to Medway if we're constantly pushing the net zero? Quality of life, can I put a plea in for beautiful housing? I think housing would be much more, people would accept development much more if we build beautiful housing that's attractive, and that we ignore the current density rules and give people space to live on the housing plots that they buy. I reflect on when I moved to Medway on St Mary's Island. Yeah, it was a nice plot for 2 people, but by the time the 3rd child came along, we had to move. And actually, if you look at a lot of new development, they are very dense in terms of the amount of actual living space that we have. I'm also wondering whether it's realistic to limit car parking spaces to 1 or 1.5 per property. I think the reality is, my reflections are, and I'll be very happy to prove them wrong, that a lot of our new housing will be bought by or occupied by people who've moved into Medway, and they won't have jobs in Medway, they will have jobs in other places, and I think it's totally unrealistic to expect people to be jumping on buses. We also need to think about our railway stations, access to railway stations, in order to make Medway attractive. In the plan we talk about the size of housing. Once again, my reflections are we've built a lot of flats over the last few years. There are going to be lots of flats built as a part of the local plan, especially on brownfield sites, because it's the only way it makes them viable. But there's also, I think, too many 1 and 2 bedroom properties being proposed. What I want to see is a range of accommodation so that we create cohesive communities where people want to come to Medway, maybe as couples, they put their roots down, they have their families, but they haven't got to move elsewhere in order to do that. The viability option. So obviously within the new planning proposals is this concept of greenfield sites having 50% social housing on them as a potential trade-off. Well, I'm concerned that will make a lot of schemes unviable, and I think, Dave, you've used this term, we're very developer-led in terms of what we need to achieve. If those schemes are not viable, then no one's going to build. We can have as many plans as we want, and I know that from the government, it's having the plan is all that's important to them. How you execute that is a different matter. But I'm just wondering what your concerns are about viability, especially if 50% of a development is given over to social housing. I'm not saying we don't need social housing, but without subsidy to build that social housing, some of that housing is just not going to get built. And finally, I do think we need to be infrastructure first. I don't mind admitting to the committee that I was reading the Gibraltar Farm proposal, and it actually made me very sad, genuinely very sad, because, you know, that development comes without any real consideration to roads. The traffic's all going to go in one direction. You know, the roads to Maidstone via Boxley are just not practical. The road to Bearsted, Bredhurst, I've got Bearsted on the mind now, to Bredhurst is not practical. All that traffic's coming down Hempstead Valley, coming down Hempstead Road. And ultimately, the urbanisation that's key within your solution is how do we look after the people who already live here? Are we prepared just to sacrifice them so that we deliver housing that I know we need, but we do need to have some consideration to the people who already live in some of these places. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Div, would you like to respond?
Chairman, thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor Lawrence for those. I would encourage members to and Councillor Lawrence has already done this following regen, is if you've got comments on the plan, comprehensive comments like that, please put them to us for consideration. But just picking up on some of the things, if it's okay, Chairman. That infrastructure moving away from gas, is there enough electricity and water? We're working very hard with Southern Water, or liaising very with Southern Water in terms of that. One of the things that we will absolutely need to do is to make sure that development coming forward is sustainable, that we protect our limited water resources. In relation to electricity, we've got to look at other options there, and Councillor Goldwyn talked about this last week, those using the river in terms of generating heat and electricity. Also, we've got some proposals out at Medway 1 at Kings North, where we've got a waste-to-energy plant there, but there could be also a data processing centre which will generate a lot of heat. That heat can be used to generate electricity when we get those district heating systems. So it's looking at all of those things. In relation to the hospital, I think we've seen in terms of comments coming out from people and this committee and others, there's a very strong view on that. I haven't got the answer at this moment in time. We continue to liaise with the relevant people in the NHS on that. And we've got a meeting on the 20th of September, and this covers the next point about local health care as well. A lot of comments coming from people in relation to doctors' surgeries, healthy living centres, and those sort of things. So we'll be having those discussions with the health authority. We've shared with them our preferred options, so they can see that, they understand our growth and where we're currently considering that, recognising it's not fixed in stone, that there could be changes, but at least it gives them a chance to give their comments to us so that we can factor them into the plan. And your other point later on, Councillor Lawrence, which is about infrastructure first, you know, the plan will enable us in terms of those allocation of the allocation sites to be able to say, right, this can come forward, but we want this, and this within these timescales. No to Medway City Estate. Yep. There, as I said, in terms of our preferred strategy, we are getting comments from people which says, like this bit, we like the idea of the preferred strategy, but we have concerns over these elements. So I understand those comments. In terms of brownfield and viability and getting that, rather than us getting to 2035 and all the greenfield sites are gone and we're left with the brownfield sites, understand that totally. We have been pretty successful over recent years in getting those brownfield sites coming forward. Victory Pier, our own Medway development company, utilising that. We've got Kitchener Barracks coming forward. A number of those have relied on either a development company taking a lesser profit and taking a lead on things where the private sector is not willing to go, or government grants from Homes England. We will continue to lobby for that because that's essential, as you quite rightly say. Your comment on town centres, absolutely agree with. We can't rely on retail. Chatham will not return to being a regional shopping centre again. It won't go back to that. But we need, by getting more residential in there, the point that you've said is absolutely right. Those people coming in there will be demanding different things, which could be restaurants, could be cafes, could be co-working areas, lots of things, and we need to be able to respond to that. M2, absolutely right. We're having, I think it's almost weekly meetings with National Highways on the M2 issue. I note your point, your comment on net zero, and we'll reflect on that. Building beautiful, who can argue against that? We've got to that's one of the reasons why we've got our we've done the Chatham Design Code, because we want to get high quality development. It's one of the reasons I've got one of the best urban design officers in the country, because we want the best. It's one of the reasons we do design reviews, because we want to push developers. This plan needs to build on that and make sure that we get the quality. And they need to be not just homes, but they need the open space. They need to be close to facilities. People need to enjoy where they're living, not only inside but outside as well. So you're absolutely right on that. Car parking. That's a difficult one. I think in different sites there'll be different solutions in relation to car parking. Clearly, if we go out to Capstone, East Raynham, the Peninsula, the villages, there'll be a greater need for car parking than there is in the town centre sites. Town centre sites, we may be able to reduce car parking, bring in car clubs and things like that to, on those. Size of housing and flats, greater range. Again, can't argue with that point. I think that's important. And I think you're building on from that. One of the things that Mark and I heard when we were at the recent celebration for St Mary's Island, to hear that 30% of people buying on St Mary's Island already live on the island. So they've gone there, they bought a one-bedroom flat. They really like that. As their needs have changed, they bought a two-bedroom house. Then it's a four-bedroom, and then they've gone to downsizing. So that's the sort of thing we want to do. So be able to people can live within areas they like, certainly continue to live in Medway, so meeting those needs. Greenbelt, we're going to have to do a review of our Greenbelt. We've only got 5%, so we're not as affected on that Greenbelt issue as, say, Sevenoaks or Tunbridge and Malling are. We've still got 5%. We will review our Greenbelt. And we'll reflect on what the outcomes of that Greenbelt review in terms of our allocations coming forward. In relation to affordable homes, so what we are finding is, and what we're promoting in here is, we recognise that those less viable sites will generate, and this is what we found over the last 20 years anyway, those less viable sites don't provide as much affordable homes, but the more greenfield sites can provide more. So we're going to reflect that in policy. And then, yeah, your point about infrastructure first, the local plan enables that. So hopefully that's helpful, but it's really, really good points. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dave. Would you like to come back, Councillor Lawrence?
Just one point, Dave. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the response. I just wonder, when we get when the Section 18, Regulation 18 closes, I think what would be really useful is if you could do an exercise where, and this is a communications exercise, because a lot of people say, well, what's the point? The council never listens. So could you do an exercise where you go, here was our plan, you said, and we've done this? Because that demonstrates that we have been listening as a council. I think that would be a really powerful thing so that residents know their voice has been heard.
Chairman,
Thank you. We'll come back to you.
Chairman, thank you. Apologies. I should have waited for your apologies, Chairman. Yes, I think that's a really good point. I've recently been working with the out on the peninsula on the community infrastructure work out there. And one of the things that they have said to me is exactly that. Councillor Lawrence, they've said, right, okay, we're giving you all these comments, we're spending all our time giving you our comments. We want to know what you've done with them. So we need to reflect on that. We had one person come to one of our exhibitions who said, what's the point of coming to this? You're not going to listen to us, are you, Mr. Harris? To which I said, well, if you're saying you don't want to see any more homes, no, we are going to be providing more homes. If you're going to be giving comments like you have, then we will be reflecting that. But that's a really good point in terms of how because people need to know there's been a purpose behind this consultation. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Wildey.
Thank you, Chair. Dave, I mentioned quite a lot on the health side yesterday because we had HASC yesterday, the hospitals, the GP surgeries, etc. But because, again, Capstan Valley has been mentioned yesterday, I did talk about the effect that Capstan has on cleaning the air and the air quality of, well, the whole area of Medway going through the towns. Also, I don't think I mentioned yesterday about the flooding, but I have previously, and there will become a point where you build a house on Capstan and you flood a house in Luton because there's already flooding in Luton. You cannot build over green space which soaks up some of the water. You then stop it soaking up the water, so that water's got to go somewhere. So they are very important issues. And as Councillor Lawrence was just asking about, we said you listened, as the people of Lawton and Capstan, Lawton and Walderslade, Princes Park, you had, going back a few years, I accept, but you had the biggest petition ever of over 10,000 signatures saying we do not want the building on Capstan Valley for many and varied good reasons. If you're going to listen to people, thank you very much. Does that mean even the developments already planned for Capstan will be stopped? And of course it doesn't, but if you are looking at people's views, you should take into account past petitions. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Would you like to respond, Dave?
Chairman, thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Wildey, for that. And we've touched on the hospital and GP surgeries. In relation to flood, and you refer specifically to Capstone, and we already know that East Hill has got planning permission. It got a planning permission on appeal. Gibraltar Farm got planning permission on appeal. And that's one of the reasons we need the local plan, because this is what's happening all over Medway. We're losing sites on appeal. But going back to the flood issue, that's a really important one, because as you say, if we don't do anything in terms of how we work with the developers of that to address the surface water, it will just flood down to Luton. So we're looking at those schemes. We need to make sure they address that surface water issue through sustainable urban drainage systems and so on. And they can do that, and they will do it. We will make sure that they do it. And in relation to air quality, really important point. Not just in Capstone, but everywhere. We need to make sure that we can address our growth needs, which will be greenfield sites. to meet our growth needs, the greenfield sites are going to have to go. We've just got to get it the right sites. But within that, we need to still plan for the open space, for electric vehicles, and for and trees and other things which help to address those air quality issues. The final point in relation to comms, that's a real difficult one to bear in mind past petitions. I think, and I really struggle with that point, Councillor Wildy. I think I would just encourage people to comment on this plan, because people can change their mind or have different views, respecting that Rainham, North Rainham, there were more people who have individually objected to that application there than I've ever experienced before. But I can't rely on a petition which came in several years ago or whatever. They've got to be commenting on this plan or planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to come back, Councillor Wildy.
Just on the flooding issue, or the infrastructure that needs to be put in. I live in Lordswood Lane, top of a big hill. Everything is downhill from where I live. Opposite my house, within quarter of a mile, again, top of the hill, houses are being flooded. Now, they all had the correct drainage system. Everything that should have been built was built for the time, but it's failed and it's still failing now. And me and my ward partners are talking to our officers, and they all explain all of the problems. Which is wonderful, and we understand why there's problems, but if it was my house that was still flooding, I wouldn't be very happy. So whatever people plan or think they're going to do to deal with the problem, my experience tells me, and talking to our officers that deal with sewage, etc., all accept that, well, the best laid plans, etc. So whatever infrastructure we put in, and developers always do the minimum, we need to make sure that it's more than the minimum and we'll actually cope with whatever occurs. And I bet you in 50 years' time when we're talking about this, there will be flooding somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wildy. Did we like to come back?
No, I think the fair comments. I do understand everything that Councillor Wildy said in terms of those people who are suffering flooding, and we need to plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huckwell.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the effort that's gone into this plan. I know you've and the hawking round you've done and the presentations you've done to different groups, so it is appreciated that that's done. A lot of what I was going to talk about was, as Councillor Lawrence has already mentioned, but I would like to say about the hospital. I would like to see in the local plan an earmark site for a potential hospital, or even one or two earmark sites of the possibility of where we would do it. You know, as Councillor Lawrence said, you know, 100,000 extra people here in the next 15 years. The hospital can't already cope. I mean, it could be that that's in Swale and we only cover Medway Hospital. But I would like to know what the plan is, because at the moment it's Medway and Swale. So if the new hospital was in Swale, then Medway could be just a Medway and it might be able to cope with just the Medway people. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in Medway, but we need to have a plan for the next 15 years or so. I have concerns about the viability. You know, we already have developers saying that, you know, it's not viable if we put 25% social housing in our development, and I see in the plan that you say it's going to be 30 in Greenfield and 10% on Brownfield. But again, you know, what other incentives, as Councillor Lawrence said, do we have to ensure that they do build the Brownfield sites? Because we all know it's more expensive and they're less viable, and it ends up being tower blocks and things like that. So that is important to understand the viability. We talk about being green and getting people on push bikes and public transport. From my experience, public transport would take so much more time out of my life if I went on public transport. I mean, I did a quick to say how long would it take me to get from my house to Medway Park, and it would take me an hour. I'd have to change 2 buses and walk quite a lot. You know, that to me is not a viable alternative than a 15-minute drive in the car. It's just so long. So what are we doing? What is the public transport plan? I mean, we have good east to west connectivity, you know, with the rail line, but north to south in the area is not very good at all. You know, if you want to get from Lordswood or whatever it is down to the town centres, it's quite hard on public transport. We talk about putting cycleways in. Now, personally, if I had a push bike that was worth, you know, quite a lot of money, I wouldn't want to bring it anywhere and put a chain round it, because we have these universal keys called portable angle grinders that can undo chains in a short space of time. So rather than just build the cycleways, what's the plan to build secure storages in certain things like Medway Park or the rail stations and things like that? I mean, part of the plan, if you want to get people on their push bikes, should be to make sure their push bikes are there when they come back and finish their business. Otherwise, you're never going to achieve that. I wouldn't want to. I know you're a keen cyclist, and I doubt you'd want to leave your push bike chained up outside here. It would be quite, you know, it could be quite vulnerable. We talk about healthy living centres. We have a problem in Rainham that the healthy living centre is almost empty, and all the GPs are moved out because it's too expensive to rent space in the healthy living centres. So what in the plan are we put? It's no good saying getting these things built if the rent is too expensive. So we need to put in the plan somehow where we're going to put these doctor surgeries, and you know, and how are they going to be affordable in the future for the GPs we want them to occupy? Because it's no good just building buildings and then as with public finance or private finance, and they just become too expensive. Car charging. Where we're going to build lots of tower blocks means that people won't be able to charge their own car. Right? What are our proposals to actually put car charging, electric car charging? If we're all going to be driven out of ICE engines by 2035, what are we going to do for car charging? From my own experience, I know in my local area they put new banks of car charging up at the services, Medway services, and it took 2 years to lay the cable to bring enough power to that, because the nearest substation with enough power was on Gillingham Business Park, and it took them over 2 years just to put that power in. So what have we done with UK Power Networks to look at all these sites and say, how are we going to make sure there's enough power? I know Council, but specifically for car charging. That's all I have to say really on.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwell. Dave, would you like to respond?
Chairman, thank you very much. I'll come back on some of the comments. Hospital and healthy living centres, we hear that daily, so there are very, very understandable comments. We have this meeting with the NHS coming up on the 20th of September on both the issue of the hospital and particularly in relation to healthy living centres and the very issues that you're talking about there in terms of Rainham. We're hoping to get some answers. There needs to be some answers. Not hoping, we need to get some answers on that, and that will be built into the plan. In relation to viability, we are doing viability assessments as part of this plan so that we know what's required for those developments to come forward and to be viable. And if they're not viable, then how can we allocate them? But we're also discussing all potential allocated sites with those promoting the sites. And one of the questions we're on those brownfield sites we're saying to them is, well, is it viable? What work have you done to demonstrate that? So we're considering that, and that will help us with the evidence base and the demonstration in the plan. Public transport and cycleways, 100% agree with you in public transport. If we're going to try and persuade people to we're not going to be able to stop car usage, not in my lifetime anyway. There will always be a need at some point in time for people to have a car. But we need to give reasonable alternatives. And in terms of public transport, I don't disagree with the point that you've said. And we need to work on making them more reliable, making them more timely, making them faster so they can. So to get somewhere, it isn't that hour difference in terms of travel that you've experienced and others, including me, have experienced. Cycle parking, I 100% agree with you. I've got 4 bikes, but there are certain, if I was coming here or going to a shopping centre or whatever, I wouldn't use my best bike because the wheel can come off in 2 seconds, even if I've padlocked the rest of the bike up. So you're absolutely right in terms of those hoops. So we do need to look at secure cycle storage in relation to homes. That includes for visitors to them, possibly as well, but also railway stations and the such like. So I agree with you, and we need to find a way of getting that to work. Car charging is the one thing I can't answer at this moment in time in terms of that point, in terms of you can plan that, but how quickly can the power be delivered to it? I'll need to come back on that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dave and Catherine for actually all the work that they had to do on this. It's a pity that they had to come and do it all over again, having done it previously. I'm going to start with some of the issues that are outside of our control. The hospital, the M2, are not for the council actually to fund, but I do agree that we need to outline the need. I think we've been doing that for about 22 years now. The big thing around parking and cycle parking and stuff like that, well, actually, the fact that we have people who think it's all right to go and steal the bikes or the cars or whatever, and that's simply down again to the fact that we don't manage antisocial behaviour. The police aren't there to do the jobs that they were previously. The numbers were depleted, and they're not only back at 50% of what they were when they were depleted. So let's just, and you can shake your head all you like, Councillor Hackwell, you talked about bikes being taken, and the reason they're being taken is people steal them. The reason people steal them is because there aren't any consequences. The reason there aren't any consequences are because of austerity. And you can gloss over that all you like. It's true, and Councillor Lawrence, you may not have been around 22 years ago when we discussed all this, but we did, and we discussed town centres. Do you want to interrupt me, Councillor Hackwell?
Just to say, there is more police officers in Kent than there's ever been.
Sorry, through the chair, please.
Yes, but I didn't raise the problems. The problems were raised by councillors on the other side. All I'm doing is I'm identifying the causes of them. And some of these things are not for the local plan. The local plan, unfortunately, got to the door of this building and wasn't pulled by us. Now we are doing a consultation. And my questions for Dave are actually around the consultation, because we know about flooding and we know about the fact that at the moment we are developer-led. But the problems with flooding are actually with Southern Water and with the infrastructure. The problems with the electricity is the fact that the electricity companies are running it. They're not even based here. So it's a fact, Councillor Lawrence, and you can tut all you like. I'm just speaking facts, as I've always done in this committee. Unfortunately, you're making points about local issues that aren't relevant to the local plan. The local plan is out for consultation, and all we're doing here tonight is actually trying to ask about what has happened to the consultation. Dave, maybe you have numbers as to how many people have responded, how many people you're hoping we might get to, and if there's something that we should be doing around the hard-to-reach groups. And last night, we had a lot about Rainham Healthy Living Centre and the fact that it's unaffordable, and the NHS very kindly in their strategy talked about this, and I think Councillor MacDonald will probably have more detail on that than I have, so I'm going to pass it. He will, Councillor Lawrence. We don't need interruptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Members, the committee is requested to provide feedback on the proposal. Councillor
Chairman, thank you very much. In terms of the consultation, I'm pleased to say that in relation to the exhibitions that we've done so far, we've had really good turnout. So I'm pleased with that. Very enthusiastic people, people who are coming mostly with a positive viewpoint. They want to be informed. They're not coming and saying we're objecting to everything. You know, there's very few people I've heard say, I don't want any homes. There was one person who said that to me, I don't want to see any homes, just as two young people were walking past us. And I said, well, where are they going to live then? And he stepped back and reflected on that, went, yeah, I take the point. So people have been really good, those who've come to those exhibitions. We've got a lot more to do. We've got Hempstead Valley Shopping Centre, we've got Medway Youth Council, we've got the Love Gillingham event, we've got the voluntary and community sector event, we are out at All Hallows, we're out at the Innovation Centre, we're going to BAME and their engagement event, we're going to Mid-Kent College, we've got a stall there all week, and we're doing some sixth form targeted online email engagement as well. And that's just the stuff we're doing in person. The comms team, as you said, Councillor Brown, are doing an amazing job in terms of that social media and other stuff to try and get to the youngsters and the harder to reach groups. So I'm hopeful that we will see a response on the local plan, the like of which we've never seen before, which is exactly what we want to see. I don't know the figures at this moment in time. But I will be coming back. When we finish the consultation, I'll be making sure that all members are aware of the responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Just touching on a couple of the health points I think is quite important to do. I agree that in an ideal world, we would like a new hospital. There has been sites identified before. I think one of the previous ones was the Great Lions. It was going to just touch on a bit there, etc. But obviously, you know, I do agree with Councillor Hackwell. Yes, we want a new hospital, but we weren't identified as one of the 40 which was going to get in the investment, although they never happened, the 40 anyway. We weren't identified, and we do need it in Medway. We do need that hospital. But I think it's about, from a planning perspective, Dave, it's about looking at how, like thinking differently about how we operate. It's clear that from the ICB and NHS England, there's no money. You've got a site up there which is historical, something over 200 years old, some of the bits on that site, so that's quite difficult to manoeuvre around. I think they've done well over the years, but still quite difficult. But I think it's about making it a bit easier and you know, the NHS have a massive, they do have a lot of estate, they mentioned it yesterday, they have a lot of estate across Medway towns. It's about how we use that, some of those facilities for that walk-in and for those scans. And like, we've got a couple that do it. Yeah. We've got the Healthy Living Centre, we're going to have the one up on the Pentagon, we've got the one hopefully in the old Debenhams. But there's GPs in areas like over in Who, etc., that would love to be able to probably extend a little bit and to have those facilities for their residents. Instead of people going to A&E and just queuing up if they've got, because they can't reach their GP. That's the, you know, we're not going to get into health here today, but I'm just saying it's about, that discussion needs to be about how we're going to think smart, not just about, because you could build a hospital somewhere else and you'll still get 100,000 people extra walking in because it's a brand new hospital. But it's about thinking smart, how we make the accessibility into primary care easy, I think. So that's around that element I think is really important. And Councillor Hackwell, we did really have a good go. Councillor Wiley would tell you, I really made the point about Rainham Healthy Living Centre. There is a brand new estate strategy, which you confirmed last night that you're going to be involved in with Mike Gilbert and etc. Because I still don't believe the Healthy Living Centres are going to be here in 30 years and they're a wonderful model. I don't believe it. But they can still be, especially under the expense and under the strategy and the PFI, whatever they run, all their maintenance contracts, etc. However, they're on good sites, they're on good places, and, you know, for accessibility of residents in different areas, look at them. We've got a really good Rainham one, we've got one in Balmoral, we've got others elsewhere. They should all be getting the same services as the Rochester one. We should be thinking about how can we put scanners into Balmoral, how can we put scanners in, how can we do extra services in Rainham. So I know we're talking about the local plan, but the health and wellbeing was up there, so I don't want to move straight over, but it's just about, you know, I feel you've got to look at the primary care element with regards to planning. So not only the infrastructure of the roads, of course, the infrastructure with, you know, the roads is important and everything else around it, but the facilities that go into those communities as well. It's no good keep building if there isn't the accessibility for people to be able to reach their GP or hospital, or even get on a bus or get, you know, public transport to get to the hospital or to get to where they need to go. Finally, on the charging points, I think the charging points is a bit of a contentious issue. It's not just tower blocks, is it? So, you know, we've got a lot of streets in Gillingham that are road. So you're coming out and you're straight onto the road. You're roadside. What are we going to do in the plan about that? You know, I keep going on at you about the conservation, in a nice way, but about the conservation area. We've got conservation areas where people want to charge their cars but cannot install a charger. They're not allowed to install their chargers. And it's, I don't want to be, it's daft, you know, and I'm not talking about ruining those conservation areas because you don't want to ruin them, but if you've got people who are thinking, you know, we're going to save the environment, we want a charger, surely let's give them in the plan the ability to do so. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me. If we want to really push a really vibrant next 10, 15 years for our community, it shouldn't be just those little estates that have a charge, but no one else can have them, or we haven't got community charges in streets or shared charges in streets. I think just thinking, I'm not asking you to do it in the next 2 years, Dave, but I just, you know, all the comments made about infrastructure and made about the environment, we could really make a really good impact on that. And I know you haven't got it easy in some of the areas in Medway, it's difficult. We've got lovely little unusual streets and unusual areas. And even Councillor on that hill with the flooding would be great. But I do, you know, we can really do a bit of work on that a bit more and make it accessible for everyone. Cheers, Dave.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Dave, would you like to respond?
Chairman, I've noted those comments. I'm grateful to the comments in relation to health, and I've noted the comment regarding EV charging. We'll reflect on that. It's an important issue that Councillor MacDonald has raised.
Thank you, David. Councillor Hackwell.
Just to pick up on Councillor MacDonald's point about charging, there is a plan in Medway to put 150 community chargers in within a 10-minute walk of people's homes, so like in the streets of Gillingham, and that plan's is available. The only problem with it is they're only going to put like slow charging community ones in, so that if you put that in, that someone's going to be there 6 or 7 hours to charge their car up. You know, I'd like to see the plan revised so that we put fast chargers in there, so people, and you probably need a lot less of them, because you could put them at strategic points like shopping centres and things like that, where people can go and get a cup of coffee, just charge their car for an hour, and then it frees it up for someone else. But that there is a plan. But
thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, Councillor Hackwell made a great point about the fact that getting from here to, from Raynham to here would require 2 buses and take over an hour, and that just seems absolutely pathetic in this day and age. So I just wanted to reflect on that. Now, obviously, there's issues with, you know, the 1985 Transport Act and deregulation of buses and taking out the ability of local communities to have their democratic say and accountability over public transport networks, which is maybe something that we need to reflect on in the next few years. But in terms of the plan itself, I just wanted to see a lot of it goes on the basis of better public transport because we can't build enough roads to get out of essentially the issues that additional houses. We know that 550 households are homeless in Medway, so we do need those houses. We know we live in a housing crisis across this country, so we've got to do our bit here. You know, whether it's for our own population, but also, you know, contribute to the national matter. But the question I want to do, which is focusing on the business services, is around our capability and about what are we looking to do in terms of investing in our own planning capability. Obviously, you mentioned risks around planners and about having that amount of resource to get on with doing this plan properly and getting through the stages, whilst having to deal with major plan applications and other things that are coming on through the way. But also I see, you know, in other policies, so a local transport plan, for instance, also needs to be, is going to be a key document in making sure that we can deliver the growth that's expected here. So I just wanted to see the reflections of how do we see our workforce planning develop over the next few years to ensure that we have the skills, knowledge and experience so that we can provide a locally led approach to that rather than necessarily over-rely on external consultancies who can be quite expensive.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Dave, would you like to respond?
I'm grateful for those comments from Councillor Field. It is something which is exercising me. I did a restructure of my team about a year ago now to help make sure that we've got the right resources there to deal with the workload. But things change all the time, as you quite rightly point out, Councillor Field, and I need to make sure that I've got the resources. We're going to see more design codes coming forward. I'm blessed. I've got Duncan Bernstein and I've got a vacant post which we should fill shortly. There are a lot of local authorities who've got no urban design officers at all. That needs to be addressed. With climate change, there'll be a greater emphasis on tree officers and landscape officers. And again, I've got 2 landscape officers. I've got a tree officer and a vacant post there as well, which will hopefully be filled soon. So we're thinking about it, but times will change. I haven't got an easy answer there. The government is talking about increasing resources for planning departments. I don't think it's as simple as just giving me another planner or 2 planners. We need to think about that skill set that you've said and what do we need. The other thing that we do need to do, and we are doing, which is about utilising digital technology where we can to free up officer time to do the work that they're trained to do, and we're one of the leading authorities in the country on that. So I haven't got a definitive answer for you, Councillor Field, but hopefully that's helpful that we're aware of it and we're doing the best we can.
Thank you, Dave. Do you want to come back, Councillor Field? Mark, you want to interject?
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's probably worth stressing that this is a challenge that we've got in a number of council departments, be that social workers, planners, private sector housing officers, and a lot of the work that Phil's team will be doing is looking, he's kind of mapping kind of those succession pathways and the skills gaps, but also through the Medway review and making sure we've got the right resources attached to each post so that we can attract people, retain people. There's that whole thing around kind of attraction, succession, and kind of making sure that our workforce is sustainable in that way, that we're bringing people through, and also looking at our learning and development opportunities so that we can upskill our existing employees as well. So there's a much broader council position on this as well as the the challenges that we've got in planning.
Thank you. Any other member? Would you like to come back in, Councillor Field?
What work are we doing to identify best practice and training from other similar urban areas, and making sure that our staff are upskilled and making sure that they're ahead of the game, looking at innovation, learning lessons from other urban centres like ourselves that will probably be suffering, having exactly the same challenges, just to make sure that, that we're in the best place.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Dave?
Chairman, I'll just come back from a planning point of view, because Mark rightly makes the point about this is not just an issue for planning, but from a planning point of view, we work on the basis of, to a large extent, growing our own. It's really difficult to recruit at an experienced level. So we work on growing our own when we send people through to university to get the skills that they need. We also we have Kent Chief Planners, we have development, Kent and Medway Development Control, Policy, Conservation, Urban Design. So we've facilitated all those groups set up. So there is that sharing of understandings and knowledge. As part of that, though, we reflect as a group, say if I take Kent Chief Planners, we reflect as a group in terms of the changing legislation, the pressures that are on our councils and where we need those skills. And we work with people like the Royal Town Planning Institute and Design South East to tell them the training that we need to upskill our staff so that we can get that. Because the point that you made is really key. If I've got limited resources, then I need to make sure they have the skills necessary.
Thank you, Dave. Are you content, Councillor Field? Thank you. Any other member? Now, just before we move to the next, just a little bit from me, Dave. You answered quite a little bit with regards to technology. And, you know, what we're doing with regards to, I know you said we're leading the way in terms of technology compared to other councils. So I'm just thinking about the Internet of Things, machine learning, and whether, you know, our solution, how are we using data, whether our solution will be data-driven, and I mean, what's the future, what's the plan, how's that going to fit in? I don't know whether it's you or Mark who elaborate on that a little bit first.
So I think in the absence of kind of seeing representations of comments through the local plan process, we will explore various opportunities around the Internet of Things, particularly. So if you look at a lot of modern developments now and how the really simple things like emergency lighting, smoke alarms, and things can be connected, so that actually there's less resource that needs to go out and check that particular thing. You can all loop back into databases and we get real-time information about the performance of assets on the ground. So there's making sure the infrastructure is there in developments for that type of thing, the right cabling, the right power, all of that type of stuff. There's a bit for me around the services that we provide as a local authority as well, because I think even if you have particularly in parts of Medway that might be more remote or more deprived than other areas, not everyone may be able to afford the broadband fee. So they might have a really good connection up to their front door, but actually they might be struggling to afford things like broadband and things in their home. So actually looking at the services that we offer across particularly across our services, so our libraries, our community hubs, make sure there's a good digital offer in those as well that will allow people to access services and things that they might not be able to get in their own home. There's obviously kind of things like building regs which will prescribe the infrastructure that needs to go into properties to keep them connected and those types of things as well. I don't know if there's anything more that I could. It's probably not my field of expertise, if I'm completely honest, but there's a range of things that we do as a local authority. But developers and other organisations will have a really clear idea as well as what the best practice is at a particular time, accepting this technology moves on really, really quickly as well. So things change quite dramatically.
Yeah, thank you. Just conscious that, you know, we are moving in a direction, we're not left behind. I don't have any other member. Thank you very much, Dave. So that brings us on to agenda item 6. Sorry. Yes, that's right. Vice Chair, do we have a recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. You do. I move the recommendation on page 17.
Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Agenda item 6. We have the statement of the gambling policy 2025 to 2028. I'll ask the licensing manager, Emily Lane Blackwell, to introduce the report. Emily.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Gambling Act of 2005 requires every local authority to have a statement of gambling policy and to review it every 3 years. It's also a requirement of the Act that a new policy is published at least 4 weeks prior to it coming into force. The current policy expires on the 30th of January 25, so the new policy must be published no later than the 3rd of January 25. I proposed the following minor changes to the policy, which were updating website links and statistical data, to ensure that the document is fully accessible to all persons once published on the website, and to remove the contact details of all the responsible authorities from the document, and they are now available on the website And this matches what we did with the Licensing Act statement as well. Between the 26th of June and the 23rd of July, a public consultation took place, during which only one response was received from GAM Care. The offering was that no changes were going to be recommended. So it was taken to Licensing and Safety Committee, and they have recommended the draft policy to this committee, and then on to Cabinet, and then to Council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you very much for your report. I think I was on the licensing committee when this report came 3 years ago, or the proposal, and as you say, that we agreed it then. I think it's a sensible policy. There isn't any significant change. It's been okay, so I'm happy to support this tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Goldwyn.
Yes, apart from the sort of minor technical change, I think that's right, because whilst it can be tempting, because when you look at the damage that uninhibited gambling does to people and families here in Medway, and proportionally it seems to be the people that gamble the most are the ones that can least afford it, which is very, very sad. But the reality is, if we make gambling more restrictive here in Medway, there's plenty of other avenues for people to go. Just with a few clicks of a mouse, and you can spend a small fortune playing poker and all sorts of other games online. So at least by having places that are there with properly trained staff who can spot people who are overspending and tell them to ban them if necessary. That is not available if you gamble online. So as much as I say I don't like gambling, I think it ruins people's lives, but we're not going to stop it. Some people would gamble on water droplets going down a window, and it is an evil thing, but I think to try and restrict it here through our policies would be a waste of time. So I think the recommendation that came from the Licence Committee is the correct one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Goldwyn. Would you like to respond, Emily?
No, I completely agree with you, basically. It would be stupid to try and really restrict our premises. They have got the correct policies and everything in place so they can stop ongoing gambling, and that gets checked every time they get inspected. So, and as you say, with the online gambling, unfortunately, we have absolutely no control over that whatsoever. That is classed as remote gambling because it's not in person, and that's all covered by a gambling commission. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 on page 283. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item 7, the Revenue Budget Monitoring Round 1, 2024-2025. I'll ask Phil Watts, Chief Operating Officer, to introduce the report. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. So we're on revenue, yeah. This report summarises the results of the first round of the revenue budget monitoring for the year. It was presented to Cabinet earlier this month, on the 30th of July. It's based on forecasts made by our managers during June. The result of that first round of monitoring is a forecast overspend of £16.5 million, of which 1.6 million relates to areas within the remit of this committee. It's driven, the shortfall in terms of BSD is driven largely by the Medway 2.0 roadmap. Now, I'd urge the committee not to panic too much at this stage. we are carrying out the work necessary. We've recruited the staff that are going to deliver Medway 2.0, so the business analysts and the service designers, but we can't, in all conscience, forecast that we've delivered it if we haven't delivered it yet. But I'm confident that the work will take place. We'll review the processes that we've committed to in the Medway 2.0 plan, and that will come down as the year progresses. It is a normal situation for us to be forecasting a difficult situation in round one, and history has taught us that forecast does come down as management action's taken and we deliver the activity that's laid out in the FIT plan. Do I want to say, yeah, so general reserves, our balance stands at £10 million. So if we don't bring that forecast down, you can see the issue that we've got. We won't be able to afford to cover that from reserves. So it is imperative that the organisation brings that overall forecast down. And obviously that's what management teams is working to, and directorate management teams are looking at how to do that within their individual departments. Happy to try and take any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Any member? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of Medway 2.0, I hear what you're saying, Phil. I think it was a mistake putting in £2 million worth of savings, to be fair. But, you know, we can have that argument any time. I'm just wondering if there's been any plan to sweat the assets in the data centre a bit harder to generate revenue, to offset some of the losses. There's fantastic facility down there. And actually, in the pre-budget period, I spoke to Paul and said, you know, could we not sell that service? Because we already do sell it. And I think in the meantime, we should be trying to get that to work a bit harder for us, especially given the ongoing capital spend going into the data centre. The only other concern I had is the continual overspend on the legal team. You know, we took action last year to up the salaries to try and get more people to come on the payroll, but clearly being a consultant or self-employed or however these people at the agency are employed is still much more attractive, because looking at the numbers, I think we're spending $800,000 on locums. We've got £600,000 worth of vacancies. So did the action we take last year, was that good enough? Should we have been a bit bolder? And are we ever going to get on top of the continual overspend on the legal team? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay, so I can respond to both those questions. In terms of the data centre, you're absolutely right, and we do intend to sweat that asset. We're also looking at using the space differently, and I know Paul talked you through how we want to do that, bring the control centre from the bunker into that space. The difficulty we've got at the moment is the building, access to the building and being able to do that. And I suppose it's not been a priority to market that service all the time. We can't let people in the building. So I think that's probably the reason for the delay, but it's certainly on our radar, and you know, you're right to raise it. And in terms of the overspend on legal services, last year, some members might recall, the overspend against that legal services budget was, I think, in excess of £1 million. What we did was build in some additional posts in this year's budget. We've also put legal services through a review and a restructure so that the team is structured differently. We're paying some higher salaries for certain posts to try and attract it. Now, if Bhupinder were here, he would tell you that that is yielding success. He's been able to recruit, but obviously not fully yet. I think he's out again at the moment. He is confident that we can recruit to that new structure, and that premium on agency staff will come down.
Thank you, Phil. Would you like to come back, Councillor Lawrence?
Just one quick question. If I understood it correctly, last year a big part of the problem was legal cases emanating from children and young people. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation here, isn't it? All the time it's taken us time to deal with, say, EHCPs, we're being hit with legal bills. Are we looking at that end of the chain to make sure that that's working efficiently and we're not shooting ourselves in the foot? Thank you.
Phil?
So That's a really good question, and it's a question that's been raised through the budget setting process for next year, and we're looking at areas where we feel that we need to take a look and take stock on, and that is definitely one that's on the list. And Bhupinder is now meeting with Kelly, the new AD in Children's Services, to look at the whole equation, because there are costs that sit in Children's Services around getting expert assessors and people like that in, and just making sure that we've got the resource in both sides so that we can get the cases put through effectively and dealt with much more quickly. So that is being looked at in terms of the structure for next year.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. As Phil said, I mean, round one is always an eye-watering overspend, and then through various mechanisms over the year, it is chiselled back. But what worries me about this year's is what we've got to remember: an extra £14.7 million went into the budget compared with last year. So the true deficit is actually £32 million. It's simple arithmetic. And one of the things that worries me, when you read it, interest on financing, the total cost has increased by 5.12 million in a year, which I work out at a 36.7 increase in that over 12 months. That sort of increase in debt repayments and interest is just not sustainable. Whilst I welcome the spend on the transformation, which we now seem to be calling Medway 2.0, because in the past we've had a very good return on that, and I hope that the £2 million proposed savings are savings that can be permanently taken out of the budget, because that was the methodology we used before. And whilst there's digital in the title of this committee, I think that the new administration made a huge mistake by doing away with the Transformation Board, which had all the key players together regularly. And just putting digital onto this title of this committee, I think it's just a nonsense, because it's not about digital. The digital only provides you with the tools. The real thing is the transformation of the way we conduct our business, and by making that more efficient. And that is the driver to make savings, and that driver has got, given the pressures that local government will increasingly have in the future, because it's very apparent that the new government is not going to be like the cavalry coming over the hill to bail out local government. Quite the reverse. They've said that there isn't going to be any extra money. So we've got to put our own house in order, and the only way we can do that, we have got to invest. So I do welcome that, keeping that going. But I think the administration made a huge mistake by doing away with the Transformation Board. It concentrated officer and members' minds. And I do hope in 2027 that the new Conservative administration will go back to doing the job properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldman. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yeah. Although I'm not sure there was particularly a question in there, but I will respond to the two observations that you made. And yes, you're right. The underlying deficit, if we do end up overspending £16 million this year, then that means that there's a £30+ million hole against the base budget. Now, that's absolutely right. That's basic maths. So I acknowledge that. In terms of the transformation savings, yes, they absolutely will be recurring. That's the whole point of this process. So we're getting business analysts in, we're getting service designers in. They will look at end-to-end processes. They will look at the resources that are employed, how many times a customer contact is handled before they get an outcome, how many systems are involved. They're going to map all of that and then hand it to a service designer and say, make that more efficient for us, and that will if that process works the way I hope it will, that will generate recurring savings. In terms of your point about the transformation board, so the new administration has taken the view that it wants this programme managed in the public domain through Cabinet and through overview and scrutiny. However, what we have committed to doing is setting up a kind of member panel that will test processes as we bring them and comment on them, so that members are involved in that process all the way through. I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I mean, it should be no surprise to this committee that the Medway 2.0 is not going to deliver the 2 million saving, because we had a presentation by Paul Boyd at the last meeting when he told us it wouldn't. In the fact that because he wanted to go down the strategy you just outlined with employing systems analysts and rather than being pressurised into savings in a short period of time, he wanted to go and do the job properly, and it was highlighted at the last business digital ONS, and Katie acknowledged that hole would exist. So it shouldn't be a surprise to this committee. So that's the first point. I also got the same concern with that Councillor Galvin had, which you didn't mention in your response, was why the uplift of almost a third on the financing costs compared with last year. Yeah, because it is even though we're getting 150 savings against the budget, the uplift is considerable. What is driving that? Is that the interest rates that is now catching up with us because we had financing, or is it that we've borrowed too much money? You know, the 40 million to buy the houses, 20 million to buy the buses or whatever, the waste trucks. So could you explain on that a bit more? So, thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Well, largely you've answered the question for me, because it is exactly that. We've got £40 million in the programme to build or to acquire, the units for temporary accommodation. We're going to have the cost of servicing that debt, but the trade-off is the savings that we're supposed to be seeing in temporary accommodation. Now, we're not seeing that at the moment because we haven't acquired the units yet, and these things do take time. So, yeah, I mean, perhaps there is an element of over-ambition in terms of when the savings come on stream, but the service is working hard to try and get the units in. We're looking at a site in Rochester at the moment that we want to get for temporary accommodation, and once we've got that, we should see the cost of that temporary accommodation start coming down. Obviously, as well, if Mark were here, he'd tell you this, we're working to try and manage the demand so that we're not having to find temporary accommodation for people, and that work continues, it always does. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil.
And you mentioned waste trucks, that was the other side, you know. 12 million quid of waste trucks, we're borrowing to fund them, yeah.
We'd like to come back, Councillor.
Yeah, and of course, I guess the other big expenditure is Gunwharf, where we're spending.
Gunwharf. and there's also a bit in there around the cost of servicing the exceptional financial support.
Yeah.
So that's the last component that carries a price.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry. I was just hoping that one of my colleagues was going to ask this question, but they've obviously forgotten. Is there any danger we have to go back for a top-up on the emergency financial support? And is the 10 million reserves that we've got enough? And where does your sort of red line sit before you feel that we're going to be in problems and you might have to take some other statutory action? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Phil, would you like to respond?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I hope I'm going to answer the questions that you want me to answer. So, in terms of exceptional financial support, The truth is we can't go back for more. So the Secretary of State, the letter said, is minded to approve a capitalisation direction up to £14.7 million. So we can't go back for more. Well, I suppose we could, but at the moment there's an expectation that that's the maximum that we take. In terms of reserves, no, 10 million isn't enough. And if I've probably said this at this committee before, but if I give you a bit of a history lesson about our reserves, when I took over this role as the Section 151 officer, which is about 9 years ago now, our general reserves were at £5 million. And so it wasn't an explicitly expressed strategy, but we did have a strategy to try and rebuild them up to a certain level. And the level that we refer to as being set by me, Section 151 officer, of 10 million, it is quite arbitrary. At the time, it was a target. 5 million is not enough. Let's see if we can get to 10. Well, actually, we surpassed that by quite some. Yeah, we got up to about 26 million at one point. But obviously, we've struggled since then, and we've had to take a couple of big hits over the last couple of years, and found ourselves in the position we are. If I was to set a level that I think is reasonable for a local authority, I would probably say something like 5% of the budget requirement, which would be in excess of £20 million. That's where I would like us to get to, if I'm being completely candid with you. And I would like to build that into a genuine medium-term financial plan. But until we start getting multi-year settlements, it's really difficult to plan for that and getting more certainty over the funding. So that's the answer to the reserves thing. And then you asked about at what point, where's my red line? So I guess reading between the lines, what you mean is at what point do I think I might have to write a Section 114 report? My view, and again I'm being very candid with you here, my view is all the time the organisation, and I feel that the administration and the council is listening to the messages and understanding the position we're in and being prepared to take the necessary action, then I won't ever need to write a Section 114 report. And that's where I feel I am at the moment. But there is a lot of hard work and some really tough decisions that this council's got to make.
Thank you, Phil. Would you like to come back? No. Phil, just one from me, actually, with regards to the broader strategy to bring expenditure back within the approved budget and ensure financial stability. Can you touch on that first? Just give us a bit outline.
Well, as I said earlier, the management team, as always, they make their first pass at the forecast. They are by, necessity, I suppose, very prudent because we haven't at this stage got enough data to go on to make really kind of meaningful forecasts about the end of the year. But what that first pass at the monitoring does is highlight, well, if we don't do anything, this is where we're going to land, and then the management action needs to take. And our management teams are they've all seen the position, they know what they need to do, and they're all now looking at how they can cut their cloth to bring that forecast down. I'm looking at things like the Treasury forecasts, and there is an inevitability that there will be slippage in our capital programme, and that in itself will bring the forecast down. There's all sorts of things that will bring the forecast down, and on top of that there will be a range of management actions that the management teams take to try and control this. Whether we can get that 16.5 million down to a balanced position, it's going to be challenging, but that's what our aim will be.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Brown.
So there are a couple of questions. Well, a lot of this happens. No, a lot of this happens in audit anyway, and you know that because you sit on audit, thankfully. Phil, 2 questions. I'm a little bit confused about this money that we're supposed to have borrowed, the 14 million, because we haven't been given it yet. We haven't drawn it down, or am I wrong? Because SIPFA seem to be of the opinion that they have to give an opinion before we can have the money. That's one question. Depends on your sense of humour, Councillor Lawrence. Our sense of humour isn't great at the moment, given everything that we've inherited or not inherited, including 40 million for a shopping centre with 3 quotes, not even 3 quotes. No, I might as well not bother the hecklers are in town.
Thank you. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yes, exceptional financial support. It's a curious model that the MHCLG have got. So we applied for EFS. What we received as an organisation was a letter from the Secretary of State, the then Secretary of State, quite right, that said, I'm minded to agree a capitalisation direction up to £14.7 million. So assuming we manage to get a budget back in line, I will need to borrow £14.7 million. And it's not simply me going out and taking a loan for 14.7. It's part of our overall Treasury position. We know how much money we're getting in. Theoretically, there'll be more than 14.7 million more than that going out at the end of the year, and that will be reflected in our cash flow and our Treasury position. In terms of whether we're ultimately allowed to do that, and this, I know it seems mad, we won't actually know that's confirmed until after the end of the financial year, because the conditions on that being kind of confirmed are that we have, first of all, we have the assurance review. Now, we commissioned our own resilience review back at, before Christmas, which said that, you know, we're not a basket case as a local authority. I'm expecting the assurance review, which is the one that's commissioned by the department, to conclude the same thing. So that should be a pass mark, tick in the box. But then, until they won't confirm the final capitalisation direction, until we've posted our final accounts and the auditors have signed off the expenditure. But it sounds mad, doesn't it? But you know, I'm confident they will.
Sorry.
Thank you,
and that
Phil.
brings us on to the other problem, doesn't it, within the audit industry and the backstops and the timetables and all that. And in fairness to officers and our external auditors, we are working hard on that, as colleagues across the floor and on this side know.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Would you like to come back, Phil?
No.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, I'm just going to touch on a bit more because I know we tend to spend, especially on this committee, we tend to keep going back in history, backwards and forwards, and a dig here and a dig there and laughing. And it isn't, I think we're all in the same boat here. We want this council to succeed and we all want to do the best for our residents, right? And it is very clear, whether people don't like it or not, or they want to hide under the covers, we did inherit an absolute nightmare. And I think if you know, Phil, I'm not going to dig into all of that, the way that things used to be done and the lack of that communication when you was, you know, when your team were putting figures together, or figures all of a sudden disappearing on budget night or being pulled out of a hat in the department. What I'm going to ask, though, is the positive aspect around, I understand your departments are now doing monthly, like, for example, social care, there's really good monthly monitoring now. So it isn't just that free monthly, or there's some real good communication going on, isn't there, between the teams, and the way that they've got into it has been pretty reassuring. So Katie was telling me it's quite good. But also, I just want to hear again about that communication you're talking about for the reassurance of you and your whole team, that open dialogue makes a difference. Because I know you said it's been a bad couple of years. It wasn't. It was bad. It was a bad few years with the reserves as well. So I'm just a bit interested, a little bit more interested in what you're saying about how, forget about all of us politicians, but how the officers and the directors are all talking now to go in that one direction which we want on the Medway 2.0, whatever, or the way we want that transformation. How is it working?
Thank you, Councillor McGill. Phil.
Yeah, thank you. So when we commissioned SITFA to come in and talk to us, conduct a resilience review, as they called it, as I said, they confirmed that actually our unit costs were pretty good. They're pretty low, below average for those statutory services. They didn't identify glaring governance failures. They generally concluded that we give pretty good value for money, but that we just haven't got enough money to meet the burgeoning demand. So on that basis, that they gave us a fairly good report, but they did make certain recommendations. Now, they're recommendations that they make sense, but in an organisation that's very lean and hasn't got the resources to undertake these actions, it becomes difficult. But they said that a couple of things that we've picked up on, well, in fact, I think we've acted on every single recommendation they made, and I think that will come out when the assurance review takes place. They'll recognise that. But a couple of things that you're alluding to there, we have gone down the road of monthly monitoring, but there is no way we could service the treadmill of taking that through DMT, CMTs, Cabinet, overview and scrutiny every month. It'd be pointless. You'd be talking about 3 months behind. It would just be mad. But we are doing that monthly monitoring at an officer level. And what's really important, SITFA also said to us that we need to monitor delivery against savings targets in a way that we haven't very explicitly done in the past. We are absolutely doing that. First thing we did is produce the FIT plan, which the savings targets were writ large in those, along with a number of other 80, in fact, actions that are about the longer-term sustainability of the organisation. That FIT plan monitoring is coming to CMT every fortnight. We dedicate an hour to it every fortnight and go through. Paul and his team highlight things that are going well, things that are not going well. And this is where some of my confidence that we'll bring the forecast down comes from, because when you look at the activity that's taking place, things like some of the demand management activity that Jackie Brown is undertaking in adult social care and in children's care, that activity is taking place. The reviews of cases, they're taking place and being reported through the FIT plan. What we're not yet seeing is that manifest in the savings being reported through the monitoring. So I do have some confidence that figure will come down. But to answer your question, Dan, the monitoring, we're doing it like we've never done it before.
Thank you, Phil.
Sorry, Chair. It's just to come out and just to reassure you, Phil, I'm sure others will as well. I really do not feel you need to bring back that monthly one too. It shouldn't be doing in that. No, because it changes and it can change, from 1 month to the next. I think we see that the quarterly figures and that's the. But it's really good that they're getting into their mindset. So it's well done.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to help Councillor Brown out with the numbers because she asked about the 14 million. If she looks on page 324, the 14 million is in that number. So the 16 million deficit includes the 14 million pounds. So I'm just not making any point. I'm just saying it's there in the report. So it's not a case of whether it's been drawn down. It's a part of the budget monitoring. To pick up. It's in the report, Councillor Brown. Just to reassure Councillor MacDonald, on this side, we want the council to be successful. Of course we did. We ran the place for as many years as we did. But what you've got to bear in mind, the biggest issue this council faces is not the quality of the officers. You know, they're doing a fantastic job doing the monitoring. The biggest, we just don't have enough revenue, and that revenue has to come from somewhere. Now, you know, you can blame us for everything that's gone on. You can bring up the old, you know, this and that. But at the end of the day, this is now your budget. Last year, you dipped into the reserves by £6 million. You've borrowed £14 million. You made certain political decisions, which may be right, may be wrong, in terms of pay rises for staff and everything else. So you've got to live by this budget. But what I'm saying, what I think we want to see, and I wonder whether Phil might agree, is that the quality of our financial reporting and the speed of it back to members, so that members can actually ask the right questions in a more timely manner. And Councillor Brown will remember from Audit Committee that we did raise whether the auditors could take a quick look at whether the quality of financial reporting to members, because ultimately it's us who are on the line here, is could be better, or just make a comment on the quality of it.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Phil, would you like to respond?
I'm not so concerned about what the auditors say, actually. I would be interested to hear what SIPFA say when they've conducted their assurance review. So they made some recommendations to us. We feel that we've responded to them. So, you know, the review of the capital, the review of our property portfolio, that's taking place, the monitoring and what have you. When SIPFA report back to us this time, I'm hoping that they're going to say what you're doing in terms of the monitoring is enough now, but we'll see. And I'll report back happily once we know what they think.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor McDonald.
It's only a really quick point, and we're not going to go backwards and forwards here on this, but just for, I don't know if we want to call it a point of clarification or anything, Councillor Lawrence, but if you remember rightly, members over your side there constantly reminded us about a budget that we set 14 years ago as a government. Constantly told us that every time we uncover something, every time that we see something historical, we're not going to close our mouth about it and talk about it, okay? Because at the end of it, at the end of the day, the Cabinet, it is their budget. Of course it's our budget, all of our budget, but we all want what's best. But if we have to remind you of failures that's caused the area, then we do it. That's it. I mean, let's not argue over it now, but we do it. Because you kept doing it plenty of times before, okay?
Thank you, Councillor McDonald.
I'll let Councillor last word.
Thank you. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair, I believe we got a recommendation on page 323.
I believe I do, Chair. So I move recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 on page 323.
Is that supported? Great. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 8, the Capital Budget Monitoring Round 1, 2024-2025. I'll ask Phil Watts, Chief Operating Officer, to introduce the report. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping this one will be a bit easier. This report details the results of the first round of capital monitoring. Again, it was presented to Cabinet on the 30th of July and summaриses the projections made by managers that were responsible for those schemes. It summarises, the report, as always, summarises the projections against the programme, and it also provides a summary of how that programme is funded. Section 5 sets out the progress on the schemes within the remit of this committee, and Section 7 details the risks inherent within that programme. I will try and answer any questions that.
Thank you, Phil. Any member? Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question of education, really. The table on page 332, the second table, I presume we haven't got 324 million in members' priorities. I wish we did, but it just seems a repeat of the total column at the end. Table 2 on 332. Yeah, but anyway, I wish we did have. It is. It's the same as the first column, but I understand that. I was going to come on to that. I was going to come on to that because I see that the only department is Regen, Culture and Environment have come in under budget against the capital budget of something like 4.5 million. Now, I have a little problem in my ward that the roundabout is broken, it cannot be repaired, and I am told there is no money in Regen to repair this roundabout. In the past, we would have maybe possibly get it out of members' priorities, but members' priorities, as you quite rightly say, has been withdrawn by the administration. I know that Councillor Brown was successful getting a roundabout or some play equipment in a park in Twiddle out the member priorities, but it's gone now. So how can Regen tell me they can't afford £6,000 for a new roundabout for the young toddlers in my ward when we've got a £4.5 million underspend in Regen?
Thank you, Councillor Hagwell. Phil, would you like to respond?
So that underspend is against schemes that are funded from borrowing. And as I said when I talked about revenue, we've got to try and bring down those treasury costs, which means if we can avoid spending on capital schemes that are funded from borrowing, that has an impact on the revenue budget. And so that's why, we're not actively looking to reuse or via that funding somewhere else. I'm not going to comment about £6,000 and whether it, but that's the reason. Where we've got schemes that are underspending, funded from borrowing, then we're not actively looking to use that somewhere else. I'm just taking that as a win, and it will reduce the Treasury forecast. Now, if there were schemes, say in education, where we had basic need funding that was allocated to one scheme to build a school unit or something, and we underspend against that, then absolutely we'd redeploy that grant to do a bit more with it, because it's ring-fenced and it's kind of use it or lose it. But with borrowing, I want to try and reduce our expenditure that's borrowed.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Actually, interestingly, that £5 million underspend when we came to Regen last week, it was to do with successful procurement of the waste vehicles, actually. So a successful procurement exercise led by the council that's achieved better value for our residents. I'm frustrated about playgrounds. We've got a playground in Canal Road by the station which has got appalling equipment. However, today, for instance, I've received an email from the relevant officer telling me to quote, "There is no longer a play refurbishment budget. This was removed 2 years ago," which is an interesting point because I think on my mind 2 years ago may well have been a previous administration who made that political decision to remove a play refurbishment budget.
Thank you, Councillor Phil. You like to comment, Phil? Any other member? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to the refuse trucks, maybe you put too big a budget in there in the first place just to make you guys look good when you knew what the unit cost was going to be, but that's another matter. Just on the ICT capital spend, so there's obviously a load of schemes coming to an end fairly shortly, but data centres are notoriously capital intensive, and I'm just wondering if there is schemes in the background that you're thinking about or the relevant teams are thinking about in order to make sure that the data centre stays in top-notch condition. And if we are going out and offering that service, that when people come in and look at it, that it's what it needs to be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. I think it goes back to the answer to the previous question, really. I mean, the data centre is something that we do. It's an asset we want to sweat. We did invest. One of those schemes in that capital programme was about fixing the floor in the data centre and making sure that the room itself was fit for purpose. But obviously, with the whole issues with Gunwolf, it's kind of taken a back burner. When we do get Gunwolf up and running, and we start to then think about sweating the data centre, at that point we'll need to look at whether it requires investment. And it will be something, the whole investment in IT infrastructure will feature in the capital strategy when that comes forward later in the year. So.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy, actually, that colleagues on both sides of the fence are pleased that we've had some improvement in the play equipment in Twiddle. It's been a long time coming. And the reason that the one on Beechings had some improvement was over safety concerns. Both it and the one off Goudhurst were recognised as needing urgent attention. But unfortunately, as always, we were left with crumbs. So I managed to get some 106 money, but being twiddled, we don't get the same level of 106 as some of your other wards do. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, on Sturry, and I'm very pleased that we brought forward HRA housing, and out of that, through quite a lot of pressure from my fellow councillor and myself and the local residents, we managed to get some modern equipment into Sturry. So I'm really glad that Councillor Hackwell recognises the benefit to young people of this, and I thank him for his kind words.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Goldwyn.
Yes, sir. Phil, talk about investment into the data centre. Certainly it was the case when we looked at it a few years ago that to go into the cloud was so expensive that having our own data centre more than competent. Is that still the case now that our data centre is far more economical than actually going over to completely cloud? I know we do use the cloud for certain things, but overall the hybrid system is still better for us. Has that study been done?
Thank you, Councillor Goldwyn. Phil, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's the short answer. But it wasn't a review that we undertook once and said the answer's no, park it. It's under constant review because, as you know, technology is a constant, very dynamic market, constantly changing, and my team are reviewing it constantly. And if they ever got to a place where they thought, actually, now's the time to go into the cloud because it makes economic sense to do so, then they will be telling me that. All right.
Thank you, Phil. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move recommendation 1.1 at page 331.
Is that supported? It's agreed. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 9, the work programme. I ask Steve Dickens, Democratic Service Officer, to introduce the report. Steve.
Thank you, Chairperson. So I would just like to draw members' attention to a change in the work programme. At the last meeting, it was requested that the Chairperson, Vice Chairperson and officers consider adding an item reduction in the use of non-permanent staff. That has been, it's suggested that's added for March 2025. And I would also like to draw your attention to the changes in scrutiny of LATCOs. This is to strengthen the scrutiny of LATCOs and to rationalise it. That's been informally agreed after consultation already between the groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any member? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 on page 337.
Is that agreed? Thank you. That brings us to the close of our meeting. Thank you.
you.